Say and spell your name for me.
Spotti Wifi, Spottie space WIFI.
And what do you do?
I am the best only CryptoPunk rapper alive.
What is CryptoPunk rap?
So CryptoPunk is not so much a genre as it is just my digital identity. CryptoPunks were one of the earliest, largest, and most successful NFT collections in history. So there's 10,000 of these digital 8-bit characters. I'm one of them. I'm number 5528 out of 10,000. And when I bought my CryptoPunk in February of last year, I realized by using a CryptoPunk as my online identity, I had a built-in audience. People in the NFT world were in tune with me, whatever I was saying. They didn't know who I was, they didn't know my background, if I had any sense at all, but some people would listen. And then I decided, well, that as an artist, as a musician, that's really interesting because it's hard to find a built-in audience as a musician. And so I was inspired by bands like the Gorillaz or artists like MF Doom, and I said, I'm gonna make my CryptoPunk, which is already historic because all CryptoPunks are historic, but I'm gonna make mine the world's best and only CryptoPunk rapper. So I gave him a name and a backstory and recorded a concept album telling that story.
Okay. So basically, it's CryptoPunk and apes that set this baseball card mentality of I get in early and one day I'm just going to be able to sell this thing for a shit ton of fucking money. And all of a sudden, because of the success of these two, everybody in the world is, there's thousands and thousands of them. What, other than the fact that these were the first two and maybe there was some, more so around the apes, there's a lot of controversy. Yeah. But what makes something like that successful versus the thousands that are out there that are trying right now? And it doesn't seem like anything has come recently that can duplicate that.
That's a great question. What separates the CryptoPunks and the Bored Apes and puts them at the top of the food chain in terms of NFTs? I think they each have their own unique moat. You know, the CryptoPunks have history on their side in terms of they set the standard quite literally for an ERC 721 contract. So basically the smart contract that became the standard for most NFT collections that followed them. So technologically, they really are like, the Rosetta Stone or something like that of NFTs. And then they've gone on to have incredibly successful sales. You know, there have been CryptoPunks that have sold for $10+ million multiple times at auction houses like Christie's and Sotheby's, things like that. So the CryptoPunks have a unique historical moat. I would say the Bored Apes also have a unique historical moat, but for different reasons. They weren't first. CryptoPunks came out in 2017. Bored Apes came out in 2021. But the Bored Apes were the most popular and successful collection that said, we are going to clearly give everyone intellectual property rights to the apes that they own. The CryptoPunks didn't do that. It was much more mysterious whether you had a copyright license. Whether I could even do what I do now was a big gray area last year. But the Bored Apes, they said, no, if you own this ape, I'm paraphrasing here, but they said you can pretty much do whatever you want with it for your own personal use or also for a commercial use. And that attracted a lot of creative types, a lot of entrepreneurial types who very quickly began building brands around their Bored Apes. You know, you have Bored Ape beers, Bored Ape media outlets, Bored Ape skateboards, ape water, ape merchandise of all different types, and that really helped catalyze their growth. Unfortunately, I don't think there's an easy way. Well, I know there's not an easy way to duplicate the success of the CryptoPunks and the Bored Apes. I think the common denominator between the two of them is really that they both innovated, which is not always easy to do. It's not always easy to figure out how do I innovate, what can I do that's not been done before. But I think both of those collections managed to do something that hadn't been done before. With the CryptoPunks, I think it's more technical about like what they did with their smart contract. With the apes, I think it's more the copyright license that they offered and some of the marketing that they've done. But yeah, I think, I don't know. I don't know if anybody will duplicate it again. We just experienced such a massive bull run and such a confluence of macro factors that kind of jettisoned NFT growth and stuff. If you think about just COVID and lockdowns and things like that, people, I know me personally, I had more time because I was laid off of my job when I bought my CryptoPunk. You know, I moved from a small apartment in Brooklyn to renting a house in Miami, which allowed me to have a home studio to record music, things like that, you know. So I think it's very possible that for a profile picture collection, for a club or a community type of project of that nature, I don't know if they'll be duplicated in terms of success that they had. I just think that ultimately the best thing someone can do probably as a creator is draw inspiration from how they innovated and take things that worked for them and see how can I apply that, how can any creator apply that to what they do. And I'll give you an example. So like, I remember shopping for my CryptoPunk, and the reason I bought my CryptoPunk was because he kind of looks like me. He has medium skin tone and he wears a baseball hat and he has spots on his face. Now that doesn't look like me necessarily, but that's what made him rare, because there's only 124 that have spots, okay? So I became familiar with these rarity traits, right? Hold that thought. With the Yacht Club, I drew inspiration from their copyright license, okay? So when I recorded my album and I said, I want to make it an NFT, one of the things I decided was I want to have rarity traits. I didn't see anybody recording music and offering it as an NFT where there were different types of attributes for different songs, maybe different instruments, different remixes, some being more rare than others. But that's what I wanted to do, so that's exactly what I did. I also drew inspiration from the Bored Apes and said, I don't see anybody really offering intellectual property rights to the music, but I'm going to do that. I'm going to let people use the music that their NFT points to and use it in film, podcast, video game, television show, whatever type of content you create, whether it's for personal use or commercial use. And in doing that, I was drawing inspiration from two non-musical collections, right? But I just took some things that they did that worked for them, and I said, let's experiment, let's see what this looks and sounds like for music. And nobody had done that before, and that's why I'm here today. So I don't know if I could give anyone instruction on how to duplicate their success, but I do think a lot of artists can draw inspiration from the way that they innovated and put your own spin on it so that you can do something that hasn't been done before.
So a piece of art could be worth next to nothing, or it could be worth millions of dollars. But a song, what's it worth? $10, $5, $3? Do you think that NFTs are going to allow music to be worth more because of the smart contract and scenarios where you can say, okay, so here's my song. If you want to buy it for $10, cool. If you want to buy it for $100, I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm not going to give you the stems, but I'm going to give you some pre-mix. I'm going to give you an alternative mix. If you want to buy it for $1,000, I'm going to show you some behind-the-scenes footage when I was in the recording studio. You want to buy it for $10,000, I'll sit down and have dinner with you. It's never going to get to the point where your song's going to be worth millions of dollars because you are, who you are, right? But is this allowing music to become more like art in the subjectiveness of the value?
Real quick, I'm assuming, is your question going to be audible in it, or should I? Okay. All right. Sorry, got to try. Can I grab my water real quick? That's a great question. So I do believe that NFTs are going to help us reprice music. Right now people don't value music like they used to. It's very difficult as an artist to sell your music. It's hard to sell an MP3, which only allows somebody to listen to your music, and 90% of the time they could listen to that same MP3 on YouTube for $0. Or they could listen to it on Spotify along with a billion other MP3s for $8 a month, right? So it's very hard to sell an MP3 which is how we think when we think about pricing music. We think music is worth 99 cents a song or $1.99 a song. But music is worth so much more than that. If a brand needs the perfect song for their Super Bowl commercial, they're willing to pay more than 99 cents, right? If somebody wants to go see their favorite artist perform live, in Vegas, it's worth more than 99 cents. So I think we have conditioned ourselves to think of it so transactionally that we think of music as like, oh yeah, 99 cents or $8 a month, whatever. I think what NFTs allow us to do is a few things. Number one, it helps artists go direct to their fans, direct to consumers. The traditional music industry is infested with middlemen, okay? So if I, as an artist, want to deliver music or content to my fans, and if they want to compensate me for it, a lot of the time, there's people in between us with their hands out. You got record labels, publishers, artist managers, business managers, booking agents, all of them lined up to take a cut so that the artist very often gets the smallest and the last slice of the pie that they baked. The artist is making the music and they might get paid last and they might get the smallest cut out of all of them. And I didn't even mention the lawyers, okay? So NFTs do help an artist go direct to their fans and cut out the middleman. The other thing an NFT does that's very powerful is it allows a musician like myself to package unlimited value for the people that enjoy my music or my content. What do I mean by that? An MP3 only allows me to share the song and the experience of listening to the song. And usually it's just for personal enjoyment. But a digital token can unlock anything. That digital token, it can unlock an MP3, it can unlock a music video, but it can also unlock access to events, right? IRL events, digital experiences, physical merchandise, digital collectibles, intellectual property rights, So all of a sudden, as a creator, I'm not just limited to figuring out how to sell my music or sell my MP3s. All of a sudden, it's like, it's a new canvas for me to get creative in terms of how do I distribute the music? Can I gamify the experience of purchasing music, which is foreign to a lot of people. A lot of people aren't old enough to remember going to a Tower Records or walking into a store, putting on, some headphones and listening to a record for the first time with the intention of picking one out and walking up to the cashier. But all of a sudden, on the blockchain, I can gamify this and make it a refreshing new experience. And the value that I promise you when you purchase it, that's not the ceiling, that's the floor. Because a year later, 10 years later, I could say, hey, guess what? I've blown up, I'm a massive artist, I got a residency at the Wynn, and if you bought my first NFT 30 years ago, I'm inviting you to be a VIP guest of mine. So yes, it's a long-winded way of saying I absolutely think NFTs are going to help us reprice music. It is helping us reprice music, and I'll give you just one example. When I sold my NFT album in August of 2021, I sold 2,000 NFTs for 0.03 Ethereum each. That's 60 Ethereum. It sold out in 60 seconds. At that time, that was about 200 grand. That was the equivalent of what I would expect to make if I had 40 or 50 million streams on Spotify. We talk about middlemen. Spotify is a middleman. The artist gets 0.00 something, 4 or 5, a fraction of a penny. I think for 1 million spins, you get $5,000, most artists, okay? I had fewer than 10,000 streams on Spotify, but I was able to package value that 700 collectors thought was worthy of them purchasing. So 700 collectors bought my NFTs. I generated $200K in revenue, which I would have never been able to do if I was just trying to sell MP3s at that point.
So it's kind of like old school selling CDs out of the back of the trunk of your car.
There are definitely a lot of parallels. In terms of my personal journey of like how I built relationships and met music NFT collectors, it is very comparable to, juking CDs outside of shows, or driving around, pulling up the trunk and selling cassettes, whatever the metaphor is. That's what I spent a lot of my time doing last year on Twitter and on Discord. And I wasn't selling MP3s, but I was building relationships, knowing that eventually I'm going to offer a token that the people who vibe with me, they'll reap benefits from. So
let's say, I'm not saying you don't have a secret sauce, right? But let's say I laid out the secret sauce of how I think a musician should approach this, a brand new musician. Mm-hmm. And I say, and the question is, should we share? Or should the artists who are making this happen be a little more reserved? But let's say I say, okay, so as an artist, you got to put out 2 or 3 kick-ass songs on Spotify to get attention. You got to put that on YouTube, TikTok, you got to play the fucking game. And then you got to hold back your best stuff, NFT it, limited edition, and think of the concept of a fine bottle of wine that gets better over age on your smart contracts. So the NFT this year gives you X, Y, and Z, but the NFT 20 years from now is the whole fucking alphabet. Mm-hmm. And therefore, in 20 years, the value of it goes up, the same as the artist value has gone up. Mm-hmm. Right? And so I'm sure you already have your perspective, you already know how to do it, you're already doing it, right? But if I think that that's a model, and I have a few other ideas of how you would market, and a lot of this is hype, right? But if I can sit down and design the perfect trajectory for a young artist, should that be part of this whole Web3 philosophy of, hey, share and like, it's a community, and I can get mine and you can get yours, and you getting yours doesn't affect me getting mine?
Well, me personally, I'm very transparent with. I don't have a secret sauce really. I share the whole recipe. I'm very transparent with how I approached marketing, how I still approach marketing, how I approach collaboration and partnership, and all the mechanics behind the smart contracts and the actual minting of the NFTs. To me, I don't see a huge advantage in keeping cards close to my chest when it comes to those things, because we need people to start doing this. I shared my blueprint, if I can call it a blueprint, and that has led to me, that has literally led to me advising people at Death Row Records, and Snoop Dogg's team out in LA. It's led to me getting to sit in Timbaland's home studio in Miami and play him my new album months before it comes out. It's led to a lot of things. It opened a lot of doors for me because it's helped me position myself as a thought leader, because I'm early, and a lot of the things that I was sharing, or that I am sharing, I did and nobody else did or has done. So for me right now, personally, I don't really believe in too much secret sauce. I'd rather just share what I'm doing and hopefully it catches on. That might change in the future, right? But for right now, I think it behooves me to be an evangelist and try to get other people on board and get them to understand what I'm doing, because the more people understand it, the more, the better for everybody involved.
So there's Web3, and then there's what I call the Web3 philosophy. Okay, and the Web3 philosophy is decentralization, empowerment of the artists, get rid of the middleman, let the artist be a better artist, because they kind of already, if you understand it and you know the money's coming. So you're no longer focused. So your next project, you're not sweating where it goes. You can truly spend what you have to spend out of your own pocket, not worry about recouping it, and be a better artist because of this technology. So when that's its root, when that's its philosophy, and you have certain titans within financial industries saying we need regulation, decentralization, great, but we need regulation, we need big money to come into the space, we need to marketize it based on our traditional stock market model, the Fed and all this regulation and all this kind of stuff. Does that take away from the level playing field, or even really, it's not just a level playing field, this is an advantage to the artist, because the artist can exude this, fuck the record company motif that most of us can totally respect and buy into. Mm-hmm. If you're saying fuck you to the record company, I want to give you my money. It's like, what was the band that said, steal this album?
Right. Well, you're trying to get me in trouble, but that's okay.
I'm not trying to get you in trouble. I'm just saying,
No, I know.
you know, isn't Web3 supposed to be art for art's sake? And it's the guy with the guitar case that I throw $1 in. I'm not even listening. I'm not standing there listening to his song, but I'm supporting him because he's a starving artist.
So I'm reminded of the Andy Warhol quote that I'm really great at butchering, so I'm not going to try to like get it verbatim, but he said something like, making money is art, and business is art, and good business is the best art, And I know that quote's not for everyone, but I do relate to that quote, and I think it's really relevant for Web3 and Web3 music, because I think Web3 music unlocks a lot of new potential distribution models, and a lot of those distribution models can make the traditional record label model obsolete. Record labels now, most of the big record labels, they operate as banks. They lend vulnerable artists that need, most of the time they don't develop artists anymore. An A&R at a label, A&R stands for artists and repertoire. Back in the day, an A&R would find an artist, find somebody with talent, and pair them with the repertoire of songwriters and musicians and engineers that they need in order to sell records. Nowadays, the A&Rs, they're sitting in front of 3 computer monitors looking at how many streams is this person getting, how many TikTok followers do they have, how many times has this song been Shazammed, and they're projecting, and they've got models and algorithms saying, this song is bubbling up, and in 6 months this is going to be a banger. Send our guy to go meet this person in their living room and sign them to a deal where we can give them a loan. They now owe us money, and we will, as the label, reap the benefits of that song when it peaks in 6 months.
It's a minibar.
It's a what?
A minibar.
A minibar?
Yeah. You take whatever you want out of the minibar.
Yeah, exactly.
Here's your bill.
Exactly. So that label model...
The difference is you have to take out a minibar. I can ignore the minibar.
Right.
Right? But that's the old scale model.
Yes.
And they have the marketing behind it, and that really helps. But can you see a hybrid between these two worlds? Can you see somebody who understands all this, develops, and then still works with inside of the record label, saying, you know what, I don't need your loan. What I need is your marketing machine.
I think that's it. I think the future of record labels, if they're going to survive in a Web3 dominated future, I think the labels become more service oriented, and they rely a lot less on predatory lending, because the greatest artist still needs resources. If they want to achieve a certain level of commercial success, it can be helpful to have a team around them, whether that team is helping them set up press interviews or marketing campaigns, tours, scheduling, all of that. All of that is a lot for an artist to handle on their own. And I think a label can support in that way and do so in a way that works for the label and still works for the artist without making the artist indebted to the label. Because all of a sudden in Web3, your community of fans and supporters, they can become your funding, rather than feeling you need to go to a label and get funding from them. And generally speaking, your community of fans and supporters, they're going to be a lot less predatory in terms of what they expect for supporting you than a label, because the label is worried about their bottom line, and your fans and supporters, in an ideal world, they're worried about helping you do what you do, which they enjoy listening to or viewing or brings them joy. So I do think Web3 helps restore a sense of autonomy for the artists and giving them the ability to make the music they want to make. There's a lot of musicians right now that feel like they are constrained by the algorithm of Spotify and TikTok. There's a lot of artists and producers that they listen to what's on Rap Caviar. Okay, let's make something that sounds like it'll fit on that playlist because that playlist will get millions of streams, which will help me pay my rent. And that is a scary reality that we live in right now, where artists aren't always making the music they want to make. And I've talked to a lot of Web3 musicians especially who feel like finding their community, finding their tribe in Web3 and going directly to those fans has unlocked the ability for them to get back to making the music that they genuinely want to make, not music that outside sources or influences are kind of telling them will be lucrative.
I don't know if you've heard of Ryan Holiday, but there's this concept of 1,000 true fans.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so when that's really all you need, I'm sure you're going to build from there. Are we in a world in which the whole model of not being able to sell music, because we all know, I mean, we see these 70-year-old rock stars prancing around on stage long before, I don't want to see them. I don't want to see that. I want to remember the Stones the way I saw them in '82. Okay? But they're doing this because that's how they have to make their music. Are we in a world in which the record companies don't quite get it, and they're going to be dinosaurs, and they're going to X themselves out of the market because they're not going to adopt this mindset? Or do you think the record companies are smart enough that they're going to adjust to it?
Well, I am a huge fan of the 1,000 fan theory. I do want to shout that out because I'm living proof of the 1,000 fan theory, you know. The 1,000 fan theory is even, I call it the hundreds of fans theory. You know, when I sold my album NFT in August, I had 700 individual collectors that collected that NFT, and they are the reason I'm here today. You know, they're the reason I'm now a full-time musician. So, and the thing I often say is, we live in a world where people think they need millions of fans, or they think they need a major record label and millions of TikTok views and things like that. In reality, Spotify needs millions of users. TikTok needs millions of users. They need that. An indie artist doesn't need that. An indie artist doesn't need millions of users. An indie artist needs hundreds or 1,000 true fans or true supporters. But we don't see it that way because we spend so much time on Spotify and TikTok. And I forgot your question because I got distracted. Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's great.
Oh, the labels. My bad. So do I think the labels will adapt, or do I think that they will go extinct in a Web3 world? I think some will definitely adapt. You know, some will adapt better than others. I think most of them are going to try to enter the Web3 space with Web2 principles. They're going to try to do the same thing in sheep's clothing that they do right now. You know, one interesting thing about smart contracts and blockchain is a lot of us see it as an opportunity to eliminate the middlemen, okay? But if you're a middleman, you might see it as like, whoa, I can make even more money, even more efficiently by contributing even less value than I already do in a Web 2 world, you know? And I see it all the time. I see music NFT projects that spring up all the time where they're gonna take advantage of the artists. I've seen music NFT projects that say, we've partnered with these 50 artists, they're each contributing a song, we're gonna help them by providing exposure and a platform, and we're gonna sell their music as NFTs, and the artists will get a higher percentage than they would ever get on Spotify for their music being played. I was like, well, that's an extremely low bar, you know, because, you know, you don't make, most artists don't make much money on Spotify. So I think a lot of the Web 2 labels and industry executives, they're going to come into this space and they're going to try to keep playing the same game that they're playing. A select few, hopefully, will say, we need to completely deconstruct what we're doing, or we need to open up a brand new division that is going to start from square one and not play by the rules that, you know, that our primary machine is playing by.
Yeah, because I mean, if they move to this mold of providing legitimate services, who can put together a tour better than a record company? Who can market better than a record company? So if those are the services that they're offering, and they're offering it on a tiered basis of you don't have to have $100,000 to or $1 million, or you know, if they're kind of saying like, okay, you got this, we're going to do this for you. You got this, and they start offering the services that the people like you need, then they're going to survive.
Yeah.
If they don't, then they're just going to continue whether they're going through that middle stage or not. That's just kind of my opinion of what's going to happen. But last question is, at what point does some artist, and maybe who would that artist be that's known, that does the Wu-Tang Clan thing, where they make an album, maybe it's a song, and they say, okay, here's the unreleased, and if you want it, here's the NFT, it's 200,000, or it's $1 million, or... I mean, at what point are these super hype things going to come from Beyonce, Jay-Z, Kanye? You know,
Right.
At what point are we going to start seeing these things where people like you and me are probably going to roll our eyes and go, yeah, you're kind of misusing the philosophy of Web3 here, but whatever.
So there's a couple things I would say. First, me personally, at this point right now in where we're at, I'm not a huge believer in token gating, at least my music. You know, I put all my music on all platforms. You can find me on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Music, Tidal, etc. But on those platforms, all you can do is listen. If you own my NFT, you can do a lot more than listen. You can actually use the music. You can actually monetize the music in your own content. You can come to my live events, things like that. So one thing I'll say is, as of right now, for me as a smaller indie artist, I try not to make my music hard to listen to. I try to make my music as accessible as possible to everyone, but then offer extra perks and more advanced rights to my token holders, okay? So that's one thing. The other thing I'll say is, like, we have seen artists come along, big artists, like I think Chris Brown put out an NFT collection that I don't even know if it sold out. In fact, I'm pretty sure it didn't. You know, like, this is a different world. And coming in, riding in on your horse with your Grammys and your millions of and your platinum plaques and all of that, that doesn't mean a hell of a lot to the maybe 10,000 music NFT collectors on the whole planet. Like, this is a very niche audience, and they're looking for more than your Web2 clout in order to move them and to get them to purchase anything. I think you really do yourself a favor if you invest your time into this Web3 world in building relationships, you know, coming to events like Web3 Expo, you know, being visible, spending time on Twitter Spaces, engaging with the community. Because just coming in and thinking I'm a big deal in the traditional music world, we've seen examples where that can lead to failure in terms of Web3 success. But there are some really good examples of people that have done it right. When I sold my album in August, I said, wait until somebody with a big platform catches on and does this, right? I made $250,000 in a day with 5,000 Twitter followers, fewer than 10,000 Spotify streams. I said, in a few years, we'll see multi-platinum Grammy-winning artists do this. I was wrong. It did not take a few years. In January, was that 5 months later, I found myself in Snoop Dogg's studio, you know, in Los Angeles, the week of the Super Bowl, where he was performing during halftime. And that week, he launched his new album, Back on Death Row. He now owns Death Row Records. He's such an OG that he now, when he records new music, he owns that music, right? He's beholden to no one. So he sells those songs from that album as an NFT the week of the Super Bowl, and he generated $44 million in NFT sales in 1 week with no tour. Nobody's doing that. Nobody on the planet, I don't care who they are, your favorite artist, They didn't make $44 million off of their album with no tour the week it launched. Now, Snoop Dogg is the perfect storm because everybody on the planet, you know, you'd have to go like deep into the Amazon to find somebody that doesn't know who Snoop Dogg is. He has the name recognition. He has credibility. Everybody loves Snoop Dogg. You know, I think it's fair to say most people, you know, people love Snoop Dogg, and he owns his music now. He owns the label. He owns the studio. So I think that we're going to see more examples like that in the next bull market. In the next bull run, we'll have other artists like myself who make six figures for the first time off of their music. We'll have artists that are huge, like Snoop Dogg, that make 8 digits off of their music. But what's going to be really interesting to me is the space in between. Because between $250,000 and $44 million, there's a lot of room to play. And I think what's going to happen in the next bull run, you're going to see some artists that they have a following and they can earn a living right now, a very respectable living, but they're not huge. You know, maybe they have hundreds of thousands of subscribers on YouTube or TikTok, but they're not huge. Most people haven't heard of them. But you're going to see that headline where that artist sells $10 million worth of digital collectibles, something like that. So I think it's a really interesting time. We saw some really cool case studies in the last bull run. But for a big artist, there are a lot of examples of there are more examples of what not to do than there are examples like a Snoop Dogg, who and you know what, one thing also, Snoop Dogg did what I would tell any artist, big or small, to do if you're getting started in this space. Number one thing you could do if you want to sell an NFT is buy an NFT. A lot of people they see dollar signs and like, how do I sell an NFT? How do I sell it? Well, do you know how to buy an NFT? Because it's very hard to sell a product that you've never bought. Yeah. You wouldn't go out and say, I've never driven a car, but I want to sell cars. But Snoop Dogg did that. Snoop Dogg, he has at least one CryptoPunk. He has he has at least one Bored Ape. He has a lot of land in the sandbox. He's a collector. He spent months collecting and building relationships with the community before that album sale at the beginning of 2022.
He also did a lot of it incognito too, though.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Awesome interview, bro.
Thank you, man. That was a lot of fun. Great questions.